We have the footage.
And greetings, everybody. Keith here. Hoping everybody's having a good day, enjoying life, living life, loving life. Hit the like, share, and subscribe button down there for me if you would. And of course, there's a PayPal link in the details. For anybody that wants to share some love, every little bit helps. It's always appreciated. And of course, the StreamYard link is pinned down there in El Perro for anybody that wants to join the panel. And there should be a link down there on Heckle-Bus and Keith Little profiles as well. Greetings. We've got John and Warrior of Truth with us. How you doing tonight, guys?
Greetings.
Hello. How are you, Keith?
I am well. I am well. We're going to be talking about, we always talk about them terms of art as the words, and now we're going to talk about the art of the terms because of those words, the phonemes, graphemes, and morphemes. What do you got? You guys know anything about that stuff?
I guess I will shortly.
Well, I've got a video we're gonna go over. Talks about language before the written word and everything. It's still around today. It's universal even, but most people get caught up in the easy style, believing that they know what they're saying, when in fact most of the times they don't. You were gonna say something, John?
Well, let me just to start off with the word morphine. I mean, it sounds like a drug.
Morpheme is something. It's it's a morph. It's something that morphs from one form to another.
Right, right. It's really a root or a stem, but I guess we'll get into that.
Yep, yep. And we'll go ahead and get started on that video here. And it's called The Language Used Before English Existed. So I guess I shouldn't say before writing, but technically, yes, it was something that was around before we came up with a literal language of any sort. Most likely, even a verbal language. It was merely hand gestures, maybe accompanied by vocal sounds that weren't quite well constructed yet. But in its most basic sense, we could convey very basics in sign language. So let's take a look at this. And of course, feel free to holler at me and tell me to pause anytime you have anything to speak on. It's 27 minutes and 58 seconds. There's a link down in the details section as far as this video is concerned. And then, of course, the guy's name is Dane Calloway. The link to his site is there as well.
Turn it up. Look, 100 years after 100 years, they lied to us about this and that. Told us all we from Africa. I mean, fiction characters turned into facts. Heard you tell me then it was not. No goddamn well that trick was capped. My wife and I wrote a book about it. It's a book with knowledge, evidence, and fact. And my other book that made it shook. Cause it's up with my people take a closer look at their backgrounds in the background, showing my people where they supposed to look. Showing my people where they get it from, where they hit it from, all sorts of angles. When it comes to this research, you must please first. Don't trust strangers, find out all of your own. That's what I highly recommend is a jazz. And if you're looking for us and talk about me, I highly recommend you the best. This is my website at the link you see. Just cross screen, don't let it miss you. I make it simple. I double down on that black and white. Just full face.
OCO, my brothers and sisters, relatives, spiritual warriors, and free thinkers. Today, I want to begin this segment with you imagining yourself traveling to a different location that you may want to go. But this particular location will be very distant from your current home, meaning that it will be located in a totally different country where the people of that country would speak their native language, which of course will be different from yours. The people of this particular country would look different, think different, and even eat different foods from what you would normally intake back home. Their customs and traditions are also different, along with their dates and times. And even the weather of this place is under different atmospheric conditions from what you would normally experience back home. Imagine that you have never traveled to this place previously, nor even seen or heard of this place before, but you travel to this distant location still in hopes of providing a better present for yourself and maybe a better future for your family. And let me add that in order for you to live there, you will have to learn from scratch a totally new culture and a new way of life, and most importantly, possibly a new trade. In fact, the only way for you to survive in this new location is to learn how to communicate efficiently and effectively enough to conduct trade so that you can now have a job or run a business and begin to somehow make an income in this foreign land. Sounds difficult, doesn't it? I mean, think about it. Even right now, with the availability of the internet and possibly having assistance from foreign interpreters at your expense, realistically, this would in fact be a difficult task for anyone to succeed in without the proper connection.
And notice the construction of that language there, trade, and then jobs and employment. Because initially, like I said before, it was just simple things to convey, and that would be the simple trades. But then after a period of time, those trades became more complex and extensive, so it required a deeper concept and deeper conveyance, and as well as that greater complexity required specific tasks and duties to carry out. Trades at one point were hand to hand. Today we're having trades that are around the world. So it's that complexity is what brings in that the modernization of how we deal with each other.
Now, with you cognizant of how difficult it will be for you to do this sort of thing today, think about how complex this sort of thing would be if a person attempted the same exact thing at least 100 or more years ago without having the luxury of advanced technology, which should make you ask some questions. Like, was there ever one universal language? And if so, what was it? What was used for our ancestors to communicate with incoming foreigners that were arriving upon these lands? And how did the English language become the primary language spoken, opposed to the many indigenous languages that already existed here in America? Well,
and we're back with March Sadness. The team is looking down the barrel.
Get your capitalism on. Get your capitalism on. Come on now.
They're gassed.
Before I reveal the answers to those questions, let's take a look at the so-called history of language and how it became what it is today. Now, there are some people who would equate language and its creation to the Phoenicians, due to the many stories of these same said people being the actual creators of the alphabet. According to the Encyclopedia of Trade from Ancient Times to Present, most of the world's writing systems before the invention of the alphabet were pictograms, such as the Egyptian hieroglyphics. An alphabet is an important cultural innovation that allows easy and therefore potential mass literacy, more accurate record and contract keeping, adaptability to new intellectual concepts, and thus accelerated cultural change. The Greek, Latin, Hebrew, Arabic, and Cyrillic alphabets all derived ultimately from the Phoenician, end quote. But what is very important to note here is that it also states that the Phoenicians are the ancestors to which all Western alphabets can be traced, but it is not the ancestor of all languages.
You guys understand that? It is not the ancestor of all languages, as some might profess. And like I've said many times in talking about the etymologies, you know, they go back to those various languages. And even in this video here, it's concurring that they're pictographs. You go back in pictographs even further than written language. So when it comes to etymology and the intents, those words themselves were derived first from various other pictographs. And those pictographs were superseded by the hand signals.
And that is because an alphabet does not produce the language. It only provides a symbol for the oral sound that a person makes when speaking a particular language. The word language is derived from the Latin word lingua, which means...
Tell me why, Dryer and Duckman. Tell me why you're shocked I'm reviewing Dane Calloway.
The tongue and speech. It is defined in the 1828 Webster's English language Language Dictionary as, quote, human speech, the expression of ideas by words or significant articulate sounds for the communication of thoughts, end quote. So, who are the Phoenicians? And why were they so important to the history of language? The Phoenicians
For the communication of thoughts, not just the conveyance of somebody else's dephonation.
knew that language was a very important part of trade. And before they allegedly created the alphabet, people wrote in cuneiform or pictograms, which could transcribe an entire idea versus just one word. This means that someone would have to be very educated, or rather indoctrinated, in order to produce these types of writings. And because they were known for traveling and expanding their
You notice I did the same thing there that I do. Educated or indoctrinated. Indoctrinated or educated. They're both the same thing. That what they're doing is they're delineating you into a dogmatic system of beliefs. And there are several of them that are intermingled to cause a greater confusion. This is the same concept as Babylonian type languages, which is what we're talking about here.
trading empire all across Europe and Northern Africa, they knew how important it was to have a simpler means of communication, especially due to their mainland being a port city along the Mediterranean Sea, allegedly located in what is called Lebanon today. And so the Phoenicians,
a port city, because there were multiple cultures coming in and out of the port, just like multiple cultures coming in and out of the Gentile square where Jesus kicked out the bankers. The bankers were sitting there because there was a multitude of cultures meeting in the same center, and they were able to exchange the different cultural coins and currencies. Same concept.
city of Byblos became an epicenter for trade. According to the Ancient History Encyclopedia,
Specifically, one of the reasons why I tell people to coin your words or purse your lips. Because again, your words have various values, and they change throughout the cultures as the different cultures use them, and that depends again upon the phoneme, which is the phonic sound, that is then put down in a grapheme in a literal sense, whether it be a pictograph or drawing on a wall or letters or symbols or anything like that, which itself is a morpheme of the phonic sound, which is the eyes to hear, or eyes to see and ears to hear. It's the translation of what you hear into what you can see.
Byblos was the religious capital of Phoenicia, and papyrus was one of its principal articles of trade. For this reason,
Now you know where Bible comes from. Bible is the etymological root of book. Have you written your own book yet? Have you written your own Bible yet? Do you understand the concept of a Bible as we know it today? That Bible, or any Bibles that came throughout history, is a collection of books written by multiple authors. What is an association of multiple authors? It's an author's guild. So again, the premise of having 18 different channels here on YouTube, so I can provide my own author's guild and protect my own writings by perhaps even writing the same things throughout different characters in different verbiage to express the exact same concept.
quote, the Greeks took the name of the city as their word for book, Byblos, and from their word for books named our word for Bible, a Biblia, which means the books. Byblos was an important shipping port known for its timbers. The cedars of Lebanon was said to be prized by other countries because it was the first city to allegedly perfect shipbuilding. The Phoenicians carried a trade route and created colonies in what is now known as Spain, France.
So they were in the art of perfecting their craftsmanship with wood, all the way down from papyrus all the way to the first ship, first paper and first ship. Both of them vehicles. One is a vessel on the oceans, on the waters, on the seas. The other is a vessel of your thoughts through the seas of communications. Do you have the eyes to see and the ears to hear?
Italy, and Northern Africa, and while traveling to different locations meant learning different languages and written scripts, which in fact took time to study and understand, the Phoenicians allegedly decided to come up with the 22 symbols that we recognize today as an alphabet. It was understood that every word that can be spoken is comprised of different sounds placed together. The Phoenicians realized that 22 sounds make up the majority of words, so they created easy to write and easy to recall symbols that anyone could learn to match with these sounds. It was also said that every one of these sounds were consonants, but many of these sounds were in fact vowel sounds disguised as a consonant symbol or letter. And many of these letters have since expanded into what is now known as the English alphabet. This is why you will find a few letters of the English alphabet having the same exact sounds and symbols, and in some cases having the same sound with different symbols. For some mysterious reason, the English alphabet has a few repeating sounds, in which a new symbol was created for each one, bringing the total amount of letters used in the English alphabet to 26. And the French and Spanish alphabet includes one additional letter, bringing their totals to 27. Now, why is this important, you ask? Well, just as the Phoenicians were traders that traveled and created colonies, so were the English, Spanish, and the French. So in other words, all of these languages are in fact trade languages, in which each of these trade languages were eventually passed down from generation to generation over time. But in a more historical sense, these trade languages were better known as pidgin languages. A pidgin language is described today as a language with no native speakers, which is used for business, trade, or commerce. It is the reduced form of a language. But if there were no native speakers, then what language is it reduced from? A lingua franca. A lingua franca, from Italian, meaning Frankish tongue, is a language systematically used as a common language to bridge the communication of those people that speak different native languages.
Now, I did a video here not too long ago. I'm going to say anywhere from like 3 or 6 months ago where we discussed this. We're going to look this up and go over it again. But we're also going to go over a term called legalese and adoption. So we're going to take a look at these things. And like I've said many times before, this English language that we have today is a mix and jumble of things adopted from other languages. And that is what a lingua franca is, a language systematically used as a common language to bridge the communication of those people that speak different native languages. Did you know English is not native to America?
No,
English is a dramatic bridge language, or
say what?
It's a West European or Northern European combination language.
Right. It originated as a lingua franca itself, as British English, but it, like I said, is constructed over there of Latin, French, German, all those others. Whereas here in America, we even have a large portion of the indigenous native language terms being used in English. And therefore, there's your difference between British English and American English.
a trade language with an added mixture of Spanish words, French words, Greek, Arabic, Latin, and it also heavily incorporates words from the many American Indian indigenous languages that were once spoken upon these lands, now known as the Americas.
Yeah, I think they literally describe English as the official language of the United States, yet it remains unofficial. I mean, this is the kind of shit they literally write, and I'll have to see if where I can find that again, but that's literally what they said. It was the official language of the United States, yet it remained unofficial. So, you know, that just goes to the arts of the terms. You know, depends on what the author intends and the grammar that they use and whether it's actually correct or not. And you have to have the competency to be able to see that. You have to know the tongues.
A lingua franca takes many words and their meanings or ideas and reduces them into a simplified version that could be understood by many. Lingua franca literally means Frankish tongue, a language spoken in Germany that eventually evolved into the language now known as Dutch. What is also—
And you remember, Frank meant free man. It was the first free man, Frank meaning first, and free man, because they were the free men that imposed taxes upon everybody else. Now, that was before we have the Swiss Confederation that took over the weights and measure system through the Treaty of Berne and Universal Postal Union and all that. Now it's the Swiss franc instead of the French franc. That's literally the way things happen. Is somebody else adopts what was used before. They convert it for their own use, and it's a more modern use. And generally, it's just a conversion of what was before.
So very important to note here is that pidgin languages and lingua francas claim to have no native speakers, but that is very far from the truth. The process, which is used to simplify a language, also seeks to reduce the origin of the word spoken. But if you simply
Now, this is my problem too. While we're on the topic, and I hadn't even thought about it until just now, but I was relating to the chicken scratch code that I developed as a literal piece of art for my own expression of the English language. So what I did was I created a little chicken scratch note off of various different characters that are already out there in the textual arenas. And the problem there is that I don't have a spoken conversion of it. But again, understand that when we're talking about the phonemes and the origins of words, like I said earlier, the origins of words may have a phonetic similarity, but the spelling is different. So the phonic sounds are the origins of the first words that we started speaking, and they were very basic sounds. Now we've just formatted them into a more extensive art form known as words, and that's extensive. Each different culture has its own art form of words.
Right. All languages, Keith, or all scripts, all of them are visuographic. They incorporate sound and meaning.
Right, and that's what I mean. You've got something that you see or something that you hear, and you have to put it in a form both for others to hear and see, so that they too recognize that similarity. And it can be done very basically. You know, if I'm out in the woods, out on the side of a mountain, and I'm with somebody hiking with me, and they're off in the distance, I see a bear, I'm not going to start hollering. You know what I mean? I'm going to do everything I can to catch their attention without hollering, first and foremost. So if I've got like a little walkie-talkie, I can throw it on low volume and click, click, catch his attention. You know, you can have a little click-click system on those walkie-talkies that would give them silent signals or very low-volume signals that would be safe communications. You know, hey, when you're out in those kind of nature areas and you need a simple communication, you have to think about that and come up with ingenious ideas to create your own form of communication. Now, this extends both to that out in the nature as well as here domestically with your animals. You've got a lot of people that have dogs for pets, and they train them through word commands. And I know I train mine through hand commands as well. Now, some people use different languages to train them so that nobody else can come up and tell their dog to sit, because their dog doesn't know what sit means in English, but they might know what it means in German or French. It might sound somewhat similar, but only the dog's going to recognize it as the way that it was intended by the one training them. So it's very important to understand your ability to create a language independent of all others for you and your specific purposes. Go ahead, sister.
Yeah.
And greetings.
Greetings. How are you, brother?
We are well. We are well.
Good. Remember the past video you had? You were talking about keys.
Yep.
And I just sat down because I spent the day meditating on some stuff, and then the spirit asked me to open up the Bible, and it opened up right directly to the book of Ecclesiastics. That's what you always talk about, right? Or Ecclesia.
Yep. In Ecclesia.
Right. And then the thing, because you were asking about the word key past day, right? K-E-Y. Weren't you asking about that, past day?
Well, that's the way it's spelled as we think about a key to a house. But I was speaking of CAYE as
Oh,
a landmass that surrounds a body of water, and it's known as
okay.
a key.
Okay. Because in the book of Ecclesiastic, it says the key word in Ecclesiastics is vanity, the futile emptiness of trying to be happy apart from God, from the
Yep.
Creator. I yield.
Yeah, and that's people thinking that they can there's such a creator that everything they do is because of their own efforts and everything, and that's that ego and that big head and that self-proclamation and self-centeredness and deceit and greed and gluttony, and that's why people seek titles and professions, and that's why I always think back to Job. You know, it doesn't matter what this earthly possession is going to bring me, um, or whether they take it from me day by day as I'm living. In the end, I only have my faith in God, period. That's where my true treasure is going to be. So let's continue on. And again, feel free to speak up and interrupt, tell me your pause or anything.
Simply follow the word trail based on the sound of a word. The origin of that word usually shows up with a different spelling attached or a very closely related meaning that is often stated with, not to be confused with, etc. Or the origin of that word could be closely related in meaning and just misunderstood. For example, the indigenous word water sounds like water, but this word actually means canoe, which is a boat that sits in the water. So
You guys understand that? So here we have the origin of something based on the concept of the observer. And the observer here called the canoe a wata or a kanwata. It wasn't the water itself that they were representing. It was the thing that floated on the water, but yet that same basic concept of sound came through. So it's very easy to see that somewhere instinctually, and even possibly it's that Akashic record that has a different language in origin that's already programmed into all of us. You know, that memory, water has memory. So is just the word water, the sound water, a memory itself of a phonic sound? In beginning was the word water? Was that the word? You never know, right? You weren't there, right? But it's ever present today. And it makes us wonder, in me anyway, that things that are ever present today, even the things we can't see, the oxygen and the gases that we know are there, the ones we can't smell and the ones we can, the ones we can feel, the ones we can taste, all that kind of stuff. These are our observations, and these are the things that we turn around and try to convey to others through some kind of symbolic manner. Everything is symbolic because we can't truly do anything except go back to the original sign language and actually point it out to them so they can see it for themselves. But then that's a silent language. So it remains in concept only.
It's pretty hard to write down, Keith, some of these languages. There's
Yeah.
I think 7,000 languages, right, in the world, but only 4,000 were ever written down.
Yeah, and there's current languages like the Click language over in Africa. There's tribe over there. It's got a Click language, and they use some vowels and consonant formations phonetically, but interspersed in there, they've got certain various clicks, and it's an amazing language. Maybe we'll have to check that out.
So pointing at the canoe in the water and saying water could have been mistaken by a foreigner as the liquid that was surrounding the canoe, and yet it is now our English word for water. Many languages are in fact the same language, hidden behind different spelling and reversed grammar, misunderstood but closely related in meanings and spoken with different pronunciations in different dialects. So now, this should make you ask some questions, like, How did we as a people begin to take on the English language as our primary language? And how did the English language become the official but yet non-official language of North America instead of the many indigenous tongues that were spoken before the colonization of this land?
Here's one thing you need to do before you buy anything.
Get your capitalism on. Come on, all you demon crazies, you demon rats. Come on, get your capitalism on.
I can show you.
It was implemented through a process called polysynthesis. Polysynthesis is comprised of two terms, poly and synthesis. Poly meaning many or much, and synthesis meaning deductive reasoning, to put together or to combine. The linguistic definition of this word was coined by a French-American linguist by the name of Peter Stephen Duponcheau in the year of 1816. And according to the 9th volume of the North American Review and Miscellaneous Journal that was published in the year 1819, Duponcheau defines polysynthesis as, quote, the act of taking the greatest number of ideas and comprising them into the least number of words.
Okay, so polysynthesis, the act of taking the greatest number of ideas and comprising them into the least number of words. We're going to see what the opposite of that is when we see the term legalese here after a bit.
Peter Duponcheau immigrated to North America during the year of 1777 and became well known for his linguistics analysis of the indigenous languages of America, spoken by the Indians. Peter Duponcheau even wrote a book on the grammatical systems of the Indian languages. This book, prized by the Institutes of France, was called Mémoires sur le système grammatical de langue de quelques sous-genres de l'Américain, or rather translated in English as the memory of the grammatical system of the languages of some Indian nations of North America, which was published in the year of 1838. It was known since the earliest days of colonization that Indians had a very rich vocabulary. It was stated in the North American Review that, quote, Indians have an innumerable quantity of words. To the testimony of Mr. Duponcheau and of Colden, we can add that of Roger Williams, who says in the most emphatic terms that the language of the Indians is exceedingly copious, and they have 5 or 6 words, sometimes for one thing. This was obviously a major issue in terms of trade, and so prominent anthropologists like Franz Boas,
and the reason they had that is because they had so many interspersed and intermixed tribes and stuff throughout the nation. They all had their own little communities, and therefore they had their own types of nuances and stuff. Even though some of it might have come from an original language earlier, as they spread out and created their own little communities, expanding across the continents, I imagine they would develop their own little unique inflections and stuff. Like I said, I would only think it's reasonable.
Oville Herskovitz, and even
when you think about it, I just wanted to say, when you think about the word grammar, which came up, you know, I was able to, it just manifested my thoughts again. It actually grimoires, and I yield.
Yep. Well, I'll have to do something on that someday. I know what you're talking about there. I don't want to get too off base here, but I know. Yeah.
Margaret Mead eagerly studied some of the indigenous languages of America in hopes of using the process of polysynthesis in order to royally change these indigenous languages indefinitely. Listen closely. Polysynthesis not only simplifies a language, but it also carries a hidden agenda to systematically alter and even remove a language completely. It was done so in a manner of familiarity. Even nowadays, we as a people do not create new words to convey a slang word or a new word.
And just to give everybody a little clue on what I just spoke of with Sister Iman, grimoire, I've spoken on 42 U.S. Code 1395X, spell of illness. That's what we're talking about when we talk about grimoire. Spell of illness. It's a spell. It's casting spells. And that's what this English language is all about. Like I said, it's a beautiful thing. If you know how it works, you can use all that twisted language that they laid down in rope and hang them all with it. One little yank.
It's just usually a commonly known word that is used that somehow finds its way into having an alternate meaning or definition. According to the American Anthropologist, Volume 6, that was published in October of 1893, when talking about polysynthesis in English languages, the writer stated, quote, "I know by experience how difficult it is for a missionary to convey to the minds of his hearers certain religious ideas. Again and again did I try, when missionary to the Ponca Indians, to find the proper Indian word for kingdom in order to make an even approximate translation of the petition, thy kingdom come. Anyone who has lived amongst Indians know the worthlessness of adducing modern names, i.e.
And this is, I've spoken or touched on this before when it comes to Ebonics. Now, Ebonics is specifically related to the melanated peoples, and many of them claim to be from the North American continent. And I can certainly see various different conflations here and there. So it's entirely possible. So I have to be open-minded and understand that when we talk about Ebonics, it's just going back to the realization that the simplest language is one that is a signification only. It doesn't delve into great deep definitions and theories and concepts of meanings. There's a simple meaning rather than a modern technological, theoretical, philosophical, psychological, in-depth contrast to its simplicity. So it's a matter of just, again, unlearning all the bullshit that you've been taught and relearning the concise English, because it is rather concise. It's not so overrated and blown up and ambiguous and far-reaching as you might think it is.
Names of objects introduced among the Indians since the arrival of the white race on this continent for the purpose of illustrating the construct of an Indian language, end quote. It was also well known by these anthropologists that I mentioned earlier, and even the ones that were in between, that by reducing the amount of words to one's vocabulary will cause a chain reaction that would in turn reduce the amount of ideas one may be able to produce, creating a generalized dumbing down effect on the population, and especially on the students that receive this type of education. For example, an American anthropologist and one of the direct students of the famous German descent American anthropologist named Melville Herskovitz, a name that you may recall me mentioning on numerous occasions, along with presenting his story to everyone in my previous documentaries, by the name of Margaret Mead.
And while we're on the topic here, real quick here, anthropology has to do with archaic artifacts and things like that, or anthropological artifacts. Now, when we think about those terms, the art of those terms, anthropology relates to man, and artifacts, art-I-fact. And that's why we talk about these national treasures and everything. Those are anthropological artifacts because the creators of all of those were men. Man himself is an artifact. Man himself is a creator. And this is the simple basics of the very little words that you can use to pass along a convey an idea. And I hope you understand what I just said. It really is that simple. You're where all the value comes from, folks. And if you don't learn how to coin your words, you need to purse your lips, because you're speaking way too much.
Speaks about this during an interview on Social Anthropology, American Character, and Primitive Studies that was conducted and produced by Howard Langer in 1959. During this interview with Margaret Mead, she stated that the usage and learning a different language other than the trade language of English is suppressed, and that this is taught to our children at a young age by the systematic usage of polysynthesis. She also shared a very essential example on how it is all done.
You ready? It's all done through that simple language that's taught to everybody, and everybody thinks they know it. But it's so convoluted because they taught you all the extra stuff that doesn't need to go with it.
We train people not to be able to learn foreign languages in the most fantastic way, because what we teach...
Because English is so easy to learn.
A child is, you see, if you take this pencil here, we teach a child this is a pencil. Now this isn't a pencil. This is an object made of wood and lead, designed for writing, which we call a pencil, and other people call it other things, and other people call it other things.
Get your democracy and capitalism. Get your democracy and capitalism. Step right up. Extra, extra. All you can guzzle.
Consume.
May I?
Oops, go ahead.
Is that why they created the charm schools very early on? Remember that?
Well, yeah, that's part of it. No, notice today we have women that are so we have women that are so emasculated that never would have happened back in them days. Women were more prone to go to those grace schools and etiquette schools and all of that rather than ever be in an MMA fight, let alone transgender MMA fight. You know what I mean, folks?
So, this type of so-called educational training, which has been implemented within our public compulsory educational institutions' curriculums for several years now, successfully ensured that the English language became the primary language.
See, think about that too, folks. How much, let me ask you, let me get right up front and center here. Let me ask you, how many words do you think they've coined since the beginning of this supposed great nation in the institution of that English language upon the natives? Rather than converting to the native language, we converted the natives to a lingua franca as cunning linguists. That's intercourse. Look it up. It's vehicular language. We're going to look at that here after a bit, like I said.
Isn't that the word that they use for the tongue, lingus or lingua?
Right. It's where we get language, linguistics. Yeah.
Of nearly all households throughout America. And as the indigenous languages of the American Indians has since been royally reduced, it must be understood that this form of systematic indoctrination of our children has been unfortunately mutually consented by the descendants of the indigenous people of America.
As well as what I'm saying to you folks there here now and have been for several years. You take your children, you send them to that public education system, you're sending them into an indoctrination concentration camp. That's all you're doing. It's a boot camp for infantry. They're training your children up to be military personnel, employees of a federal government that is a military government. So no matter what you end up doing, no matter where you are, quote, employed, you are considered in paper or on paper as a officer or agent who has delegated powers from an authority through an oath and a license, allowing them to do things that otherwise would be illegal.
Indeed, brother. And that's why they sign these young men and women up very early. And I was just thinking the other day when I was thinking about drafts, when you're drafting instrumentality, but they made it seem that you had to apply to get into the service, which is selective services. That was the draft system. And then they put you in boot camp before you were assigned or you went into some type of infantry. Am I correct?
Yep.
Or you were assigned a post. You had to be assigned a post.
Yep. And that's a receiver in a service of process in legal terms.
The entire purpose of sending our children to school is so that they could participate in the act of industry and trade by getting a good job. Although there are no existing legislators that list English as the official language of the United States, the transition from the indigenous languages that were once spoken to the English language was a systematic effort brought about to ensure business efficiency and that the trade ran more smoothly. On March 3rd, 1819, Congress passed an act making provision for the civilization of the Indian tribes adjoining the frontier settlements. It is very important to note that the word frontier is, quote, the border or confine of a country that is furthest advanced with a part that fronts an enemy or which an invading enemy meets at front, end quote. This act of 1819 states, quote, that for the purpose of providing against the further decline and final extinction of the Indian tribes, adjoining the frontier settlements of the United States, and for introducing among them the habits and arts of civilization, the President of the United States shall be, and he is hereby authorized in every case where he shall judge improvement in the inhabitants and condition of such Indians practicable, and that the means of instruction can be introduced with their own consent, to employ capable persons of good moral character, to instruct them in the mode of agriculture suited to their situation, and for teaching their children in reading, writing, and arithmetic, and performing such other duties as may be enjoined, according to such instructions and rules as the President may give and prescribe for the regulation of their conduct in the discharge of their duties. End quote.
And for the discharge of their duties. See, that's a simple contract that contracted them all in to duties and obligations, and in not qualifying the legal capacity for what it's supposed to be. Those documents were signed in ignorance on both sides.
Those indigenous families that accepted education and employment did so under the guise of civilization. So where did this idea come from? Well, it could have came in response to the pleas of President Jefferson to the American Indian chiefs upon this land. According to the address made to Indian chiefs by Thomas Jefferson during the early 1800s, pleas were made for the tribes to go into business of trade and industry with the incoming foreigners, stating that those who accepted employment as, quote, cultivators of the earth for the maintenance of their families, those people would be supporting their families better and with less labor. They were assured that by raising stock and bread and by spinning and weaving clothes than by hunting, that more provisions will be provided, and that a woman will clothe more by spinning and weaving than a man by hunting.
And notice they came in and wiped out so many indigenous creatures. And the beaver is still coming back today. Bison, all kind. Don't call them buffalo. They're not buffalo. They're bison. See, and this is part of the problem. The people that use these lingua francas and don't understand their origins will continue to call them things buffalo. Should you call them buffalo? Isn't that the indigenous name? Well, what's a bison? There are distinct differences, but yet they all come down to one thing: the observer. Are you observing the same thing? A third side. What's that? What about a first side? These are just two sides, the duality of something that's already singular. Aren't we told very simply to minister the word of the gospel to all creatures, large and small? He provides for even the tiniest. What makes you think he won't provide for you? So why do you need investment in a job and a future to ensure the survival of your family? Isn't it already assured?
To promote our democracy.
Absolutely, capitalism all the way, brothers and sisters.
Thomas Jefferson also stated that, quote, compared with you, we are but as of yesterday in this land. Yet see how much more we have multiplied by industry and the exercise of that reason which you possess in common with us. Follow then our example, brethren, and we will aid you with great pleasure. End quote.
So they expanded above and beyond what was needed to fulfill wants and desires. So it was definitely, in my opinion, and again, I'm not against technology, but I'm certainly against the abuse of it so that it takes away the individual rights and rights, rituals. When you start convincing the natives that they need to get rid of their rituals and change to an agricultural system, a multicultural system, where there's an aggregate of others involved, it's the same thing as a lingua franca. It's a multifaceted cultural system where nobody's got a native tongue or a native culture.
Technology is great, except for when it's withheld from the public and they use it for themselves and keep us in technology that's 50 to 100 years behind what they have. That's the problem. power
Well, yeah.
differential.
Exactly, and that's because of those patents and copyrights we talk about here and there.
And I find it interesting that language and the English angel-ish language comes from Enochian or Phoneme alphabet. Roots of language comes from the letters, supposedly. If you look at Dan Winter's research, comes from John Dee and other people studying the angles of light that actually forms the letters of the Enochian alphabet. And
Right.
it's the angelish language, English,
Right,
Cherokee.
and it's language, which is languish, and it's so the angels that languish. Aren't those the fallen ones?
Exactly.
I mean, man is conscripted just like the angels, except we've fallen to earth. We are the angels in language. This is a test for our angelical spirits in manual form.
Exactly. And then that's where it came up with the prism. If you listen to the
Correct.
word prism, it almost sounds like prison.
Yep.
And you're being engulfed by the light, correct?
Right. It's a visual prison.
Yep.
So,
It all
by sending
follows those angles of light in the magnetic field. And when you use language, you're twisting that field around.
Yeah, you got toroidal currents. And then when you've got consonants, your toroidal currents are created by your vowels. And then when you have consonants, you're using your teeth or your tongue. Teeth, tongue, lips, or cheeks to create a different constructed sound that it changes that toroidal current. It morphs it. It's the same thing as the morphing of the phonic sounds onto paper. You're morphing the vowel sounds by creating consonant forms in the mouth. Tongue, teeth, lips, and cheeks.
children to school and preparing them for the workforce and capitalism and industry, it was thought that we would somehow be excelling to a greater level in life. But this was actually the beginning of slavery here in America for those who were not yet prisoners of war.
42 U.S. Code 1395X. It's a spell of illness. It's known as inpatient hospital treatment, and that's so that they can bring you up in public education schools to teach you the English. They even have spelling bees. Did you ever get stung?
And we cannot get to this point without adopting a common language that was familiar and foreign at the same time, or so we thought.
Well, there's a lot more than just the bees, Keith. There's, I mean, look at syntax. Say that word slow. You know.
You mean syntax?
Yeah, syntax, prefix. Look at the last part of that word. There's tenses. Why is it so tense? Then there's Grimm's law. Does anyone know what that is on this call? It's a part of language that describes like clauses and stuff. It's Grimms. So it's Grimm.
You think that's why they came out with the Harry Potter books?
And my apologies there, folks. I had a coughing fit. But notice he said there, he spoke of adopting. See, again, it's pretty much universal. People understand that well, educated people, I guess, that have researched this. People understand that this is the English language is nothing but an adoption. They go through an adopting. So again, we're going to look at the definition of adoption after we get done here.
Because there was, in fact, a universal language of trade already in use.
Get your capitalism! Get your capitalism now, you demo rats!
before interpreters, and before foreigners could fully understand the indigenous language upon this land, and before the mixture of German and Indian languages that created English, what was used amongst our ancestors to communicate with incoming foreigners that were arriving upon these lands? The universal language available that was used to conduct trade in America amongst the Indians and foreigners during that time is the same language that is used with babies and young children before they could speak the language of adults. It's the same language used in sports amongst referees and umpires. It is the same language used between a baseball pitcher and a baseball catcher. It's the same language used in secret organizations and amongst law enforcement officials. It is the very same language that you would use if you were somewhere that you could not speak. The language.
And like I said earlier, it's a language you can create in your own form to train your own pets, your own children even. You can create a system of signs just for your own family for certain offensive or defensive situations. You never know, Red Dawn situation. We're living in modern times and people are just fucking crazy and insane. You never know. Never know.
That was commonly understood. This language is known universally as sign language. And according to the handbook of the church's missions to the Indians, entered at the post office of Harvard, Connecticut in 1854, but published in March of 1913, quote, sign language was of extensive development and existed all over the world and bore a resemblance to the sign language now used in some of our deaf-mute schools. Picture writing the world over probably grew out of sign language, the first stage in development. The second was pictographs, and the third, alphabet. These merge into each other by a slow and gradual process. End quote. And the third, alphabet. These merge into each other by a slow and gradual.
A lot of this stuff is so ancient. It's hard to, it's hard to understand, like where a lot of this began. It's thousands of years ago, but this pretty much describes it.
That's where they came up with the language of Braille.
Well,
Helen Keller.
Right.
Helen Keller.
Yeah, and this is also the principle of etymology. When I speak on that you have to go back to before the predecessor of words, which was pictographs, and here we're going back to the predecessor of pictographs, which is hand signs, and understand that this is going to the concept that it crossed multiple cultures, multiple communal societies. Like you saw, the baseball players have their own signals, football players, everybody has their own signals. Even the orchestrator in front of a large band has his own signals, right? So the premise here is that some of the pictures found on rocks may have been carved for simple amusement, but the majority were made with the purpose, usually the communication or record of an idea. So when we think about that, every little stroke of the pen can form an idea. That's what we're looking at. A picture can form an idea. It doesn't take a full paragraph or anything. This is why we have that adage: a picture says 1,000 words.
Yeah, the hand shapes indicate more action activities, like you just said, like sports, music. I think when you get into writing, it gets deeper, and you could express more that way.
Right, and that's why we have those the hand signers for emergency alerts and stuff like that. It's a much more complex expression, but for those learned in it, it's specific and they know it.
Quote, it is unfortunate that the sign language is the common language of mainly the deaf and the mute today, and that is no longer widely understood as it was before, when it was used widely amongst those who conducted trade upon these lands. It too is one of the Indian languages that is now in danger of becoming extinct. And some may say for a very good reason, because it has been said that written language and spoken language was developed to hide one's true intent. And when we are
And that brings me to interrupt here real quick. I've got to look up Keith Little, because if we remember correctly, we're talking about language here, and the intent of the one conveying that language, as the man just said there, oftentimes has something that they want to convey, but yet behind that conveyance, there are certain things that they don't want to expose. So they develop that language to be specific so they can do such things. The Indian code talkers in World War II, the last one, his name was Keith Little. Says Keith Little. We also have others. We've got composer, performer. We've got, here's the Navajo code talker, Keith Little, died here not too long ago, a few years back. Keith Little, another multi-instrumentalist, consummate musician, got a Lincoln profile for somebody, Keith Little Band. Keith Little was a code talker for the U.S. Marine Corps with 5 videos. Born and raised in Sierra Nevada, Gold Country foothills. Little Band, Keith Little Band. Let's see what else. Private First Class. Apple Music. So when it comes to the character of a name, it seems, when we look at it, somebody that communicates. I was just wanting to point that out. I thought that was kind of interesting.
Focus so much on what is being said or what was written, we just might miss the signs. I'm just here to make you think.
I'm just here to make you think. I love it. I love it. So what do you guys think?
Everything is in divine order.
It's pretty important to understand the construction of the words and everything, isn't it? I mean, again, referencing Isaiah 54, verse 17, if no tongue is to prosper against you, and you're supposed to rise up against anybody that place judgment against you, that's a pretty strong statement. That means you got to learn those tongues. Go ahead, brother.
There's like the more complicated they make systems, the more important words are.
Oh yeah.
You know, it's like English is like the bedrock of so much of the legal system. They have their own dictionary. Medical system has its own dictionary. The news media, they all have their own styles manuals. It's just,
Well, yeah. Think about what they said with the native Indian languages. Oftentimes they would have 5 words for one thing, 5, 6, 7 words for one thing. What do you think we have today? Do you know how many words or terms mean to cut? I mean, it's amazing how many synonyms and things like that we have in the English language.
Well, that's why we're the only language that has a thesaurus.
Yeah, that's why I say it's important to get that thesaurus and find out, like the other languages do, and start out with the fucking meaning first. And it'll show you the words that apply. So let's look at adopt, because this is an important term. I've always spoken on this. I was adopted myself. But when we think about it with languages, it says adoption as a noun. It says action of taking. Action of taking. So it's an action noun. It's an action of taking a child as one's own. So we literally have the definition of adoption as a noun phrase that says action of taking a child as one's own. So it's an ownership by taking. Okay? Condition of being adopted. So I was taken. French adoption, or directly from late Latin adoptionem, nominative adoptio, a taking as one's child. Shorter form adoptatio, noun of action from past participle stem of Latin adoptere, choose for oneself. Take by choice. Select. This is why we talk about that selective service. See, that language is used to form service contracts. And it's a wicked spelling bee. Adopt, especially to take into a family. Adopt as a child. From add to plus optere. Does that look like optics? You have to observe it first in order to take it, folks. Choose, wish, desire. You can't choose it, you can't wish for it, and you can't desire it until you see it. From pi root opt to choose. Option. So you have an option as in optics. Action of choosing, power or liberty of choosing. Choice, free choice, liberty to choose. So what words are you going to choose, folks? Well, let's move on to the next one. Adopt as a verb. To take oneself. Make one's own by selection. Selective service. A back formation from adoption, or else from Old French adopter, or directly from Latin adoptere, choose for oneself, take by choice, select, adopt, to take into a family, adopt as a child, blah, blah, blah. Original in English of friends, fathers, citizens, etc., as well as children. The specific sense of to legally take as one's own child, and that of to embrace a spouse, a practice, method, etc., are from circa 1600 related adopted. Did you adopt the English language? Did you adopt a method known as legalese? Did you adopt a legal system? Did you adopt it inherently because everybody else did? Are you going to adopt to jump off that bridge if 98 other people do? So let's take a look at legalese. And of course, again, folks, stop me if you have anything to say.
I would like to say that I think it's pretty damn ridiculous nowadays that you have to, before you even say anything or write anything down, you got to create an index with a glossary defining every word you use, which stops the flow of communication the way you're trying to communicate. You got to it's just ridiculous.
Yep.
It's just getting way too complicated. You can't even speak and people take you out of context.
And that's why it's so important to check words, and be open-minded and know that somebody may not mean what you think they mean. And that's what makes it important to learn the construction of sentences and stuff, so you can see whether it's conveying a complete idea that you can count on, or if it's just babble.
It's all optical illusions and booby traps. Our entire language.
Absolutely.
I don't know if a lot of you have been seeing what they call angel numbers. And I remember, Keith, you talk about ecclesia. And then for some reason, like I said, it came up. I just opened up the page of the Bible. and it came up, and it came instead of ECC, it comes up of EKKLESIA. And it says the meaning of that word means assemble. And then when it talks Ecclesiastes, means speaker before assembly. Is that Congress?
Absolutely.
I
Well,
yield.
it's a prophet unto the nations at minimum, as far as I'm concerned. You know, and that's why I say that address for me is Brother Keith, stop, in Ecclesia. I am assembled. I do have full powers. I can speak to any leader of this world. Let's sit down. So when it comes to the term legalese now, and again, this is from LIIWEX, legalese. Pay attention to what this says here. It says legalese informally refers to specialized terminology. In other words, what we just saw, that video, is a specialized terminology. It's a lingua franca. Legalese is a lingua franca itself, consisting of other lingua franca to try to help other people that only have lingua franca as a language because they don't have a national language. So it's easy to convert the two. Slip in a little word here or there, out of context here. Oh, change the identification slightly here. A morpheme of the grapheme that remains the same phoneme. Keith Little in all uppercase still sounds Keith Little, as it would be in upper and lowercase, as it would be Keith stop, Little stop in upper and lowercase. They're all three going to sound the same, but they're all graphically
kind of like CCC. All sounds the same, but there's a bunch of different shit going on right there.
Absolutely. Realize the real lies with your real eyes. And phrasing used by those in the legal field and within legal documents. Legalese is notoriously difficult for the public to understand. That's why they write it that way. Key features of classic legalese include long, wordy, complicated sentence structures, utilizing passive voice and obsolete formalisms, and the usage of Latin, archaic, or unnecessarily long words when simpler and clearer language exists. So they're expressly, on purpose, intentfully clouding the words, muddying the words, coloring the words. It's an art form.
Yeah, how about the doubles and triples?
Terminology.
Yep.
Denoting the field of study.
Yep. Although there has been movement towards the use of plain or simple English, according to the Plain Writing Act, legalese persists in the legal field. This is often attributed to legal professionals who believe that legalese increases the prestige of legal jobs, impresses clients, and protects the market demand for legal services. Because, folks, if you learn to understand how simple it really is, then do you need an attorney? particularly if you're not incorporated and organized in the capacity where you have a board of directors that can even hire an attorney to represent your corporate fiction in those administrative courts. Proponents of legalese also hold that it allows for greater precision in legal writing. Precision. Is that like incision? What's scission? Remember I said there's a lot of things in this English language, in the way we look at it when we break them down, that mean to cut. What are incisors? What are scissors? What is precision? Is it concise? Do you get me now? Is this making sense? In legal writing.
It's making a lot of sense. And that's why, again, with ology, it's a word forming element that indicates a branch of knowledge or science, or usually a form of logy.
Yeah, and look at this one. Circumcision. Okay? Think about that, guys. While I pull up circumpunct. Circumpunct. This symbol is referred to as a circumpunct, or a circle with a dot in the middle. The dot in the middle is called a void. The circumpunct acts as emotional restraint, while the void acts as a challenge that is on the horizon. Does that look like a symbolism of maybe a circumcised penis, as in circumcision? I mean, is there a similarity? I'm only asking, folks, is there a symbolic image that conveys that same concept?
You get the truest image when you look from an aerial view.
Absolutely. So let's continue on. We got legalese to finish up here. And it says the formation and use of boilerplate contracts and form documents encourages legalese. Pay attention. As there is no economic value in rewriting these such templates. Legal writing courses in law schools are increasingly emphasizing the benefits of legal writing that is clear, concise, and can be understood by non-legal readers. Would that be the public that they just proclaimed is notoriously difficult for the public to understand? Proponents of plain English, according to the Plain Writing Act, argue that since non-lawyers have their legal rights, duties, and obligations adjusted by legal instruments, parties should be able to understand the content of the instrument without having to incur the added expense of hiring a lawyer to translate legalese. Anybody catch that? Kara did. What are they supposed to represent? A translation. See, you can hire an attorney, 3 different capacities. In your corporate capacity, to make a representation of that corporate entity according to the statutes, codes, rules, and regulations as it's organized under those such things. Or you can plead that those statutes apply to the people running this stuff, the lawyers, and everybody else, and that under that they are to file things for you, or you can hire them to translate and file things for you. So if you need translation, you can hire them to translate and file the documentation so translated. So let's continue on.
Yeah, we need that, especially with words like hereof, thereof, whereof,
Absolutely.
null and void. What the hell's all that?
Now, one of the things I like to point out in some of these LIWX definitions is they like to blue line highlight things. In other words, Latin here is in blue ink, and it's got a line underneath it. So it's a clickable link that's going to give us a specific definition of Latin as used here. Latin refers to a form of Latin used in modern legal texts. It is a type of legal jargon that is used in the United States, as well as in common law and civil law systems around the world. Law Latin does not exist as a complete language, but exists instead as a collection of Latin words and phrases borrowed, adopted, from classical, medieval, or church Latin. Law Latin terms take their meaning from modern jurisprudence and legal precedents, divorced from their original usage in Latin. In other words, the meaning of the Law Latin term may differ significantly from the term's original meaning in Latin. In the U.S. legal system, many Law Latin terms have developed extremely particular meanings, creating precise precision, definitions, and nebulous concepts that can't be easily expressed in English. What? So you mean that document you have in front of me that's written in legalese can't be written in English? Because, see, I don't know legalese, particularly since it's written by each individual according to their own ideas and concepts pursuant to whatever case they're working. So let's go back. And the next one, legal writing, is any type of writing within the legal profession. Legal writing is any type of writing within the legal profession. Can they require you to construct legal writings, folks?
Hell no.
Oops. Conveyance of concept in plain English says legal writing is any type of writing within the legal profession. Are you licensed to do so? End of story.
They're not either.
That seeks to confer legal information to others that is usually clear, concise, and above all, accurate. In many legal settings, specialized forms of written communication are required. Remember, the term of communication is the conveyance of a debt. Okay? In many manners, or in many others, writing is the medium in which a lawyer must express their analysis of an issue and seek to persuade others on their client's behalf. Some of the most common forms of legal writings include briefs, memoranda, client letters, and even judicial opinions. The drafting of legal documents such as contracts and wills is yet another type of legal writing. So I got to ask you, do I have to draft up legal documents stating a will? Are they trying to tell me I have to have a living will in order to defeat the courts of probate by demanding that I write up a living will, which is a type of legal document, or legal writing, excuse me, which I'm not licensed to do so? I'm only asking questions.
Brother Keith, didn't you say in the language of legalese, as you were reading, didn't they talk about boilerplate?
Well, that's the next one. I'm just coming back to it.
Okay, but isn't in boilerplate has to do with mill work? Isn't that where millwrights they have to go through apprentices before they become a millwright, and that have to do with contracts, with boilerplating?
Well, it may, but they don't mention it here. What they do mention is boilerplate is a colloquial term used. So they're using that boilerplate term, but for them, they're going to use it to describe stock language. I got to mute you, sister. In a legal document that appears in all instruments of that type. General standardized language in a legal instrument. In other words, when you start using those legal terms and conditions that you're not supposed to, then you've gone beyond the English language that you should be using. Because that's what's getting you caught up in the legal world, is you keep using those legal terms. And again, it's part of the education system indoctrinating everybody to believe that they need to use that legal name with a name and address that expresses it in symbolically through the legalese used to do so.
And as you say that, Brother Keith, I want to confirm, because I just looked up boilerplate under the Investopedia, and it said the bottom lines, boilerplates are a big part of the corporate, legal, and information technology sector.
Yeah, and that's again because it's all about the language. And notice it says describe stock language. You're of the local stock, and it's the language you use. People have been calling themselves resident all their life. That's a legal term. United States citizen. Been confessing you've been a United States citizen and pledging allegiance to the flag of the United States and the republic for which it stands all your life.
But in early English, they said you came from stock. You came from if you were a people, they said that you came from a particular stock of
right,
of what they call depending on your title or your name or your calling as your last name, you came from a particular stock of people.
Yep. And this is why where they get us with is a boilerplate clause is interpreted and construed against the interests of the party offering the clause, absent evidence that the parties negotiated the terms of the clause. So, absent the evidence that the parties negotiated the terms of the clause, it's construed against the interest of the party offering it. So, in other words, it's saying that there's a qualifying part that says that they take on a liability if there's an absence of the evidence that the parties negotiated that term. This is that part, who just said it, Kara, talking about full disclosure. They never disclose the truth. They never disclose that they're supposed to translate that shit. That's their obligation. Okay? So let's continue on. Back. And we go to contracts and forms of documents. Encourages legalese. Contracts are legalese. Contract. A contract is an agreement between parties creating mutual obligations that are enforceable by law. The basic elements required for the agreement to be legally enforceable contract are mutual assent. Mutual assent. Does that look as sent?
I laughed because I said this. I said the word just when you said it, I said it at the same time.
See, that's the original language, as sent. Is it as sent? You know, did you accept the child in the dirty clothes and adopt him as sent and then dress him up in new clothes? Did you adopt that word and then redress it for your own use? Same thing. It's a beautiful language, folks. Adequate consideration expressed by a valid offer and acceptance. Adequate consideration. Capacity, and legality. In some states, elements of consideration can be satisfied by a valid substitute. Possible remedies for breach of contract include general damages, consequential damages, reliance damages, and specific performance. See, I'm not the agent or officer of the contract. As a public servant of the public trust, you are. I am a benefactor of that public trust, and I expect to receive the benefit that I am so duly qualified for. Contracts. Background. Contracts are promises. What? Does that look like a commercial term? It's a promise to pay if it's a note. Contracts are nothing but a bunch of notes. Words. 1 USC 1. Words denoting numbers, gender, and so forth. Words denoting numbers, gender, and so forth. They're a bunch of notes. Are promises that the law will enforce. Contract law is generally governed by state common law, and while general overall contract law is common throughout the country, some specific court interpretations of a particular element of the contract may vary between the states. This is why it's important to discuss those elements. It's elemental, dear Watson. If a promise is breached, the law provides remedies to the harmed party, often in the form of monetary damages or in limited circumstances. Do you have a third leg to stand on? In the form of specific performance of the promise made. So again, folks, this goes to the deal that I'm trying to express to you, that these people already made a promise. The promise is already there. They already took an oath to that promise. And the first promise was to seek the immutable counsel of God. And he sealed it with the first seal and with the first oath. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was God. So what word was it? So let's take a look at the next one. The last one, like I said, I mentioned this. I did a video on this in I don't know how to get rid of this now. No. I don't know how to get rid of it. Anyway, we'll just continue on. Lingua franca. Go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to read this, as you say, because I was reading Ecclesiastic again, and it says, skepticism and despair melts away when life is viewed as a daily gift from God or the Creator.
Absolutely. Remember what the definition of loan was the other day? Said a loan is a gift of God.
Yes.
So yeah, that's exactly what we did. We loaned them all the data elements. It was a gift of God. Hold on, folks. I somehow, there we go. Okay, so back to it with lingua franca. Like I said, I did a video. I can't remember the title of it. If anybody finds it, let me know. I'll connect it with this video. But and I'll do the same, of course. But I spoke about lingua franca, and here we have it on Wikipedia. Excuse me, Wikipedia. And I believe I did a short discussion on here as well. But I wanted to go over it again. It says a lingua franca, Frankish tongue, for plural C usage notes. Also known as a bridge language, common language, trade language, auxiliary language, vehicular language, or link language, is a language systematically used to make communication possible between groups of people who do not share a native language or dialect, particularly when it is a third language that is distinct from both of the speaker's native languages. Particularly when it's a third language. So if I'm actually German and Scottish, and I don't speak German or Scottish, and my companion is Mexican and she doesn't speak Spanish, then we're using a third language. See what we're saying? Anyway, lingua franca has developed around the world throughout human history, sometimes for commercial reasons. I bid for most often for commercial reasons, because it's called so-called trade languages. Facilitated trade, there's that facilitated. But also for cultural, religious, diplomatic, and administrative. So what they're saying is, first and foremost, I believe, in my opinion, it comes for commercial reasons. And because of various cultural, religious, diplomatic, and administrative conveniences, they might create their own little offshoots, like we've seen in that video. You know, the auto workers or traffic workers might have one set of signals, baseball players another, football players another, all the way down the line. Just different semantics. And as a mean, go ahead.
I'm thinking about, is that also where they created these lodges and they talked about an auxiliary? Is it auxiliary? Am I pronouncing it correctly?
Auxiliary.
Yeah, auxiliary, right.
Right. What is it? What does it do when you lodge something into the record? That's why it's called the lodge. They're keeping records.
Right, and minutes. Because when
Yep.
you go to a lodge, when you go to these lodges and they have these delegates, the members, I think they're called delegates, and then they keep minutes, because I remember this as a very young child and I saw it with my own eyes. And then when they are keeping these minutes in these lodges, they something I wanted to say and I lost my train of thought, but they had to do what they call, something had to do, I think what they call their boards, their auxiliaries, or you know what I'm trying to say, Brother Keith?
Auxiliary.
Auxiliary, right. Because I remember that. And everyone in the lodge were at different levels of capacity, just like the different
Yeah.
levels of capacity with the military and these
Right. And
courts.
and that's the same thing with, like, I think they what they call WAPs, Women's Air Patrol Service. They just had a different capacity in the military force, and so they had their own little culture, of course, separated by gender. You know, just as it would have been separated by religion or culture or anything like that. That's why we have separation of sports. We have gender separation of sports. We have age separation. We have weight separation. So as we continue on, let me see here. Douglas Harper's, I wanted to make sure I got this out here, and then we'll get on to the usage notes that was mentioned up above. Douglas Harper's online etymology dictionary states that the term lingua franca, as the name of the particular language, was first recorded in English during the 1670s. Although an even earlier example of the use of it in English is attested from 1632, where it is also referred to as bastard Spanish. Bastard Spanish. Remember that Isaiah 54 I always talk about? Let's take a look at that. The first verse says sing. So we're talking about words. And then it says, O barren, thou that didst not bear, break forth into singing and cry aloud. Thou that didst not travail with child, for more are the children of the desolate than the children of the married wife, saith the Lord. Does that sound like that bastard English? Or bastard Spanish, excuse me? It's bastard something, ain't it? That's why we're supposed to rise up in judgment, or rise up and condemn those who would place judgment against us, because it's a false judgment. It's a bastard judgment.
Well, basically, brother Keith, I've heard people say in the past that English is a bastardized language.
Yes, it is. That's why it's called a lingua franca. It's telling you that it merely adopted similar terms from other languages and now they're going to use it for their own purposes. So it's telling you have to pay attention to the changes in the definition by its use. A thing is defined by its use.
And you know, as you say that, I'm thinking about the etymology of words, because first they show you like Middle English, then they show you French, and then they show you Latin and the different pronunciations. And it
Right,
seems like a lot of legal terms are French terms.
Right. Well, and I also spoke about it the other day. It relates to I can't remember what video, but we spoke on the different dialects of German. There's a High German and a Plain German. So, you know, and that's, again, I mentioned it earlier. There's American English and British English. So it exists in so many different ways, and it's just been so convoluted that people really need to understand. It's a matter of being able to get back to the simplicities, like I've been saying.
Right, and you are so right, because they even have Old English and Middle English, and now they have Modern English, so you can choose.
So let's see here. I think we're just about done here. Oh, yeah, I mentioned this in the video too. Akkadian followed by, get to it. Akkadian followed by Aramaic remained the common languages of the large part of Western Asia from several earlier empires. Sanskrit historically served as a lingua franca throughout the majority of South Asia. The Sanskrit language's historic presence is attested across a wide geography beyond South Asia, showing that other countries adopted it from its place of origin. Inscriptions and literary evidence suggests that Sanskrit language was already being adopted in Southeast Asia and Central Asia in the first millennia CE through monks, religious pilgrims, and merchants. Amazing. The importance of getting back to the beginning, folks, so you can understand what the true intent of the original word is before it gets stretched and twisted and curved and curled and tied around your neck like a noose when you use it. What do you guys think? I think it's an important message to learn the languages that you're being taught so you can understand the differences. And when they bring us up in this society, dependent upon a legal name and a name and address being used together so that we can use that supposed language without teaching us the difference, I think there's something bastardly wrong about that.
Yeah, I think there is no valid contract without the meeting of the minds. And if they expect me to study another 10 years to learn every fucking word so I can live, they got another thing coming, because I've been doing carpentry for 30 years, over 30 years, spending 6-7 days a week. So they can't expect me to learn every single word. So I know exactly what the hell I'm saying all the time. I come from my heart. And I know when I enter a contract, I honor what I'm supposed to do. And all these hidden meanings and shit is bullshit. They can't ensnare you in that.
Yeah, I don't know legalese. I'm not licensed as such. And so the best I could do is seek counsel in my Father which art in heaven and hope that he would not lead me into temptation, but would rather deliver me from any evil being used against me. You know, no tongue shall prosper. And so that
I leave it up to God.
Yeah, so I can rise up and condemn anything that you place as a judgment against me. This is
I mean, I know enough now. You know, like you said, we've all there. Everyone that's in this has been studying for at least 10 years to learn what's right and what's wrong. I think I got a grasp of it, but you know, I'm trying to learn what I'm going to use, and just that. You know, I can't learn everything. It's impossible.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and as you saw there, they can't require anybody that's not licensed in the legal profession to express themselves in legal terms because they don't know legalese. So
Exactly.
that tells us that what we should be doing is asking for the definition of each and every term that they're using as it's used. So what
Yeah.
is receiver? And if they can't give you a definition of receiver, it's wise to know what that definition of receiver is so you can put it before them so that they know what you're saying.
Yep. I think, doing a little glossary in our documents of what we're saying wouldn't be the worst thing.
No, it's
Using,
you put in a set of definitions, and you can use
yeah,
definitions from several different sources, just so long as you explain to them what definition it is that you're using, and the more succinct and concise definitions you can use, the better.
yep. Yeah, I have yet to do that so far, but I'm pretty much going to be doing that, so they know exactly what I'm saying.
Oh yeah, well I'm working on one right now. I've been working on it all day in regards to my companion. I found a couple cases that they're trying to come after her for almost $10,000 again. So I've got to work on that and see if I can get that presented to the courts, and we'll see how that works out.
Yeah, I'm
But
going to be doing a declaration tomorrow, like writing a long declaration of who I am, what I am, and just going to put that on the record for them
well, you don't
and get
have to
rid of
make
the
it long.
presumption.
Yeah, you don't
Yeah,
have
I
to
mean,
make it
just
long.
everything I need to put in there, you know?
Well, I've been doing this over 7 years now, and I found a lot of writings where I thought I had to put everything I need in there. It just gets to be too much, and I can see where they would call it a frivolous filing or something like that. So
Yeah,
it's
just as far as status, citizenship, who I am, what I
right,
am, and
simple.
all that. It ain't going to be a book. It'd probably be one page, maybe two at
Yeah,
the most.
a base foundation that you can start with and then develop from there, because there's going to be a lot of errors in a lot of records, and so it's just a matter of
Yeah.
establishing a base foundation that you can go through and creatively or adaptively, excuse me, create remedies to each different situation along the way. It's not something that's
My
going to happen overnight.
Yeah, no, my biggest thing is I'm trying to figure out how to certify my documents without having to, get a notary on every damn document I do. But I don't know if that's possible or not. But it's hard to get
Well,
these
again,
notaries to work with you.
It's not so much a matter of having a notary, but making a public notice. You don't need to file this stuff or record this stuff, folks. You can make it a public notice, and then anytime anybody affronts you, you just send them a copy of that public notice with your receipt, with a copy of the receipt showing that it's a contract in private already. You've already announced to the world. You've already made your declaration.
Right? Well, I guess that's what I'm gonna have to do.
So,
Common law, copyright, and all that stuff in the public.
yep, just some basic, simple declarations. And you don't even have to do that. I'm not saying you have to or anything. It's not legal advice or anything. These are just conceptual ideas that, according to the way the laws and the words and everything are written and everything, you should be able to provide your own self with some kind of level of protection, showing that you have the powers to do so, and that it is that simple. Hey, I'm a
Yeah, I know.
peaceful man. I have
Yeah,
no
I
beef with
think
anybody, and I'm here as a sojourner, as a prophet unto the nations, from the very Spirit of God that sent me here, so
Yeah,
ordained and sanctified. Go ahead,
yeah,
sister.
yeah. There's
Yeah, go ahead, sister.
I was thinking about what the gentleman was saying, and um, I just got confirmation to what you were saying in Ecclesiastic chapter 10, verses 12. It says, "The word of a wise man's mouth are gracious, but the lips of a fool will swallow up himself." The beginning of the words of his mouth is foolishness, and the end of his talk is mischievousness, madness. A fool also is full of words. A man cannot tell what shall be and what shall be after him. Who can tell him? And it's talking about the labor of the foolish. Readeth every one of them, because he knoweth not how to go to the city. And that's why they have all these things. You know, they have the states, and then they have the city. So, you know, that's like everything, one bill's on top of another, like the federal, the state, and the municipalities, which is the cities. So it
Yeah.
just,
Well,
I
and
don't
that's
know.
the base. That's the base foundation of having people involved in this system, and we understand it as a democracy, where we're supposedly promised a republic form of government, and yet here we are in a fascist movement through a mayoral form of government, which is a local government. And it's because they're they're the ones that are observing all the idiocy and the people that think that they're residents and United States citizens and wanting to use that legalese and all this and that. And you're not required to, folks. I keep trying to tell you, all these laws and everything, the way they're written and all that, for the legal purpose, should tell you something. Particularly after you read those definitions of legalese and contract, boilerplate, and all that. It's ridiculous. So anyway, we're gonna close her down for the night. We're going on 2 hours, so if you guys have anything to say on the way out, please do so. I appreciate everybody's support. Please hit the like, share, and subscribe. And remember, there's a PayPal link down in the details section for anybody that wants to share some love. And every little bit is appreciated. So may God bless you in return. And anything left to say, please do so.
Brother, the only thing I want to say to the gentleman is he have any social media page? As long as he put his truth on any of his page, like YouTube or Facebook or Instagram, any of those, that is his receipts, and it's oral, because that's the way we did stuff in the past, was through oral speaking.
Right, and you can, yeah, and I'll agree on that. You can just send anybody you need to a notice of that.
I agree. Silence is acquiescence.
Yep. All right. Well, with that, we are out. Again, I appreciate everybody's support. Remember, I love you. I don't give a rat's ass whether you love me back. That means I don't care if you hate me. So may God bless you and have a good night. Bye now.